The most important ones. Emily Wilkins on Capitol Hill with Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Emily.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you, Senator, for joining us today. Senator, over the last year, you have multiple times called for Powell to cut rates.
Right.
What are you looking for today?
Look, Powell has been painted into a box by Donald Trump because we watch, on the one hand, that inflation seems somewhat moderated, and we need to get those rates down so people can afford to buy homes, and the cost of groceries we're watching go up. But we've got the problem of the softening labor environment, all because Donald Trump is creating chaos around the tariffs, chaos around what's going to happen with the national debt and this budget that they're talking about pushing through, and chaos in the Middle East. Is Donald Trump going to try to drag America into another endless war? So all three of those create, any one of them would be a lot of economic chaos, but all three of them together means that Trump is really caught. If he lowers rates, that's good for the employment side, but not good for the inflation side. If he raises rates, obviously that's a problem on the employment side. So I think there's a real problem here. The Fed is getting boxed out by a chaotic president.
And I want to talk a little bit about that because, of course, there were some concerns that Trump would potentially replace Powell before his term was up. Now, Trump has said he will not do that. But today he called Powell a stupid person. And he's talked about potentially nominating what some are calling a shadow chair. And I'm wondering, does that concern you? Could those things really undermine a lot of what Powell is trying to do in his independence?
Look, Donald Trump has been trying to undermine Jerome Powell. And frankly, anybody else anywhere in Washington who doesn't just immediately bend a knee to Donald Trump. It's a particular problem with the Fed, and particularly at a time when Trump is creating so much economic chaos. We need a steady hand at the Fed. And what Donald Trump is trying to do through his words and sharp elbows is to try to make that hand as unsteady as possible.
So it sounds like even though you've had some strong words for Powell in the past, at this point you're really trying to focus on letting him be independent, not really putting your finger on the scale in terms of whether we need a rate cut or not this time.
Powell and I have different policy approaches on both monetary policy and on oversight of the giant financial institutions. We disagree, but I have never questioned the independence of the Fed. I will try to persuade the chairman by giving him arguments and showing him data. But the independence of the Fed is central to the strength of our economy. To undermine that would be to undermine all of America.
I know for a while, too, you and Powell, you guys did not chat with each other. That's been reported. But we also know that from documents the Fed has released that you and Powell have had a number of individual one-on-one phone calls since the start of the year. I just wanted to ask what restarted that communication? And can you talk a little bit, when you are on the phone with Powell, what are the normal topics of conversation?
So I don't talk about private conversations, but I can tell you that we are both committed to preserving the independence of the Fed. I don't think the chairman would mind my sharing that, since that's exactly what he says in public, and it's exactly what I say. We say the same thing in private.
Is there something Congress can do to really make sure that independence is there? Is there a role?
Well, we've already performed our role. We wrote the laws to preserve the independence of the Fed. But now the Republicans in the United States Senate are trying to undermine that. So, for example, they're trying to cut the salaries of people who work at the Fed as just one more angle in to try to bring the Fed to heel. And I just can't underscore this enough. Making the Fed more political, more dependent on Congress is not good ultimately for anyone. Whether you think interest rates should go up or down, it is not good to have a political Congress led by these Republicans and Donald Trump to try to get the Fed under its thumb. We need an independent Fed that does its best possible job on monetary policy and on big bank oversight.